Hello, everyone. Today we have with us Robyn Darling Greenlee from South Valley Academy. Robyn, how are you doing today?
Doing well, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Thank you for being here. Well, first thing we want to do is find out a little bit about you. We want to know who you are and tell us your journey in education so far.
Well, yes, I have been teaching upwards of 28 years, I think now. Some of those years overseas. My first real teaching job was teaching 7th grade, which is what I'm doing now, but it was as a Peace Corps volunteer in Mariental, Namibia, Southern Africa.
Oh, wow.
And did a lot of teaching overseas, taught in Turkey as well at a school in Izmir. Came to New Mexico and taught on the Navajo reservation for 3 years and really enjoyed it. Ended up deciding to make New Mexico my home after growing up in San Diego. And I've been here ever since. I'm now teaching in a community known as the South Valley in Albuquerque, where my students are by and large Spanish speakers as their home language. Some families have been here for generations. Some are fairly new arrivals to the United States. And I'm at a charter school, so we serve kids 6 through 12, 12 grades. And I'm still teaching 7th grade English to predominantly second language learners.
Wow. That must be very challenging and interesting at the same time.
Yes, it is challenging.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I know that you love probably the weather in San Diego. San Diego's got great weather. What about Albuquerque?
So New Mexico, I enjoy for the seasons. Growing up in San Diego, I never experienced season.
It's just...
I enjoy it, and the sky is beautiful. It's very vibrant blue, like the backdrop of your screen there. The sky is generally that blue here. So we call it the land of enchantment.
The land of enchantment.
Beautiful.
I love it.
Yeah.
So tell me, so you're teaching, these folks with different languages, and why, in your opinion, is literacy instruction so important, especially with that population?
Oh, wow. Well, I think with language, you have power, right? If you're able to, of course, read and understand written content and then also produce your own voice or share your voice through writing, it gives you power, it gives you influence, it gives you a place at the table, so to speak. So a number of years ago, I was still teaching humanities and covering the social studies and ELA standards, and this particular school decided to split those two disciplines, and they asked me which direction do I go. It was hard because I had studied U.S. history for so long and loved that content, but I knew that ultimately English language arts is where I can make the biggest impact on my students and still infuse some of the social studies through my teaching, by the novel choices that I make for our class. And so with that, just thinking about, going back to the question of the role of literacy, it's citizenship and knowing your rights and responsibilities, being able to understand that. And
yeah,
I'm able to do that with my content.
Yeah. A big part of that is just being able to think logically and being able to advocate for yourself. The written word and the spoken word is very important, and being able to put together arguments and, like I said, advocate for yourself is very important, especially for certain populations. So thank you for that work that you're doing, for sure.
Absolutely.
And speaking of that, which is, I think, teaching is one of the best professions in the world. Everything comes from being taught, everything comes from learning lessons. And so what advice do you have for people who are thinking about teaching? And because there's a shortage in some places around the country where people are not deciding to go into teaching. So what would be your advice to people that are thinking about it, and how awesome is it to be a teacher?
Yeah, I often reflect on the fact that when I talk to young adults or college students, I rarely hear, I'm studying to be a teacher, like I used to hear very regularly. when I was growing up, and then in my 20s and even maybe in my 30s, it was still a profession that was sought after. So why do it? What do I love about it? Well, I love the fact I can look at my bulletin board over here to my left and see the "Dear Miss Greenlee, thank you," and narratives about what they're appreciative of, and of course knowing that you are making a difference. I know that's very cliche, but knowing that kids, they come to school, many of them, maybe not all, but many of them, looking forward to seeing what you are going to share with them today, what skills you're going to provide or scaffold for them, and see them grow and see them start to recognize where they've grown in their writing and their vocabulary development. I think, oh gosh, going into teaching is extremely gratifying. Otherwise, I wouldn't still be at it after all of these years. Sometimes people say, "When are you going to retire?" Well, I don't plan on retiring anytime soon, because this is what fills my cup. I love it.
Yes.
I think it's important to get into a good program for teacher preparedness. In California, we had to go 5 years. New Mexico's 4. And I look back and I think I'm glad that in California they pushed us that extra year and did a full year of student teaching, because I think often people come into this profession not ready. They haven't had the mentoring long enough in a classroom to really understand what they're getting into. So yeah, but I highly recommend the work we do. I love it, and of course there's lots of opportunities for growth and learning new things, and you're always exposed to new strategies and curriculum, and yeah.
Yeah, I think that, being a particular age now, I would think that, being in the classroom and being with these young people, it's just, like you said, it's like constant learning for you as well as the students, because things are changing, things are evolving and growing. So there's always new things to not only teach, but for you to learn as well if you're a teacher. So it's like you're learning at the same time along with your students. So that's a pretty cool thing. And with that being said, are there any lessons that you've had recently that kind of got you excited and got your students excited, that got more engagement than others?
Yeah.
Recently?
So the lesson that I have employed for many years now is writing letters to support our men and women in uniform who are deployed. So we write letters to the troops. We partner with Blue Star Mothers of the Rio Grande Valley, and I reach out to men and women who are currently serving who aren't deployed, who come sort of as I call it the letter writing campaign kickoff. So they come to the school and we all convene in the cafeteria and in the bleachers, and these men and women share about their experiences serving in the military in different branches. The Blue Star Mothers send a rep, and then the kids proceed to write 4-paragraph letters, and for a lot of these kids that's the most writing they've been asked to do, believe it or not, when they arrive. And we do multiple drafts before those letters leave, and they are put into beautiful decorated envelopes that are very patriotic. And so those letters go in care packages that the Blue Star Mothers put together. We contribute goodies as well, and they get mailed all over the world. And then we wait and we hope we get letters back. And every year we do, usually somewhere around 4 to 10, I would say. So some years are slimmer than others, but when a student gets a letter back, we let him or her read it, and then it becomes our letter, and we all share it aloud, and we get to pull down the world map and reflect on where that person's serving, where he or she came from, because oftentimes they didn't come from Albuquerque, and learn a lot of geography at the same time. And around that time is also when the anniversary of 9/11 is honored, and so we are also engaged in our first ThinkCERCA custom lesson that I create, which really supports thinking about our country and then those serving and the sacrifices and what happened on 9/11. So I pose the question to them, should the anniversary of 9/11 be remembered every year? So they have an article to read And what's interesting is there's always one or two in every class whose claim is that the anniversary should not be remembered every year, but yet they can justify their claim with reasons and evidence tied to suffering and families not wanting necessarily to be reminded every year of their loss. And so it turns into this really interesting fall season of thinking about our country, service, sacrifice, and the shared history of our country's loss in 9/11. So I would say that's probably the most profound unit of study of the year is the letter writing, especially because of the replies we get.
Wow. Yeah, that's impactful. That's real. I remember, growing up, of course, the something similar was like the Pearl Harbor experience, but now kids today, it's 9/11. That's their big moment in history that's closer to them. So let's shift gears a little bit. What about strategy? Like, are there any strategies that you've recently tried that's new that may have worked, or anything you can think of?
Strategies. You had given me some prompts of what to think about. So I remember the question about describing a new strategy, time that might have been challenging, and I was going to reflect on the fact that when ThinkCERCA was first introduced to me by my previous school, I thought, grade essays on a computer? Egads. And it took a couple of years for me to get some momentum with that.
Okay.
And it's ironic that this, of course, was before 9/11. I mean, before 9/11, another nightmare, COVID. This was before COVID. And now, of course, not looking at a computer screen would be highly unusual as a teacher. And grading on the computer is second nature to me now. And using the tools and the rubrics available on ThinkCERCA are gifts. And I use them with confidence and ease now. But in terms of new strategies that I'm using, I can't think of anything right off the top of my head, but I did reflect a lot on when that question came up on just the learning curve of learning to grade and not have my pen on the couch and write all over kids' papers with notations of how to edit. Yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, it does. And that made me want to ask you, have you had a chance to experience the AI grading with ThinkCERCA yet?
No. And so I understand that's available. I'm still going to be one of those teachers who is a bit incredulous about these things, because I have looked at other teachers' AI feedback to my students, or shared students rather, in different content areas. And I've often thought, if I'm not reading the essay myself, am I really going to know what's going on? And I don't think my kids are sophisticated enough yet to pull meaning from this generic feedback. Mm-hmm. I'm still reluctant. I'm going to stick with the old school way of doing things for now. Then I thought that way about being online to begin with, and look at me now.
Look at you now. Hey, that makes a lot of sense. You have to test things out. I mean, just because something's released doesn't mean that, you're going to just jump full steam ahead. You know what I mean? You got to just really test it out and see if it works for you. So thank you for doing that. So yeah. Now, you said that, it took you a while to get started with the ThinkCERCA, but you love it now. It took a while for you to be able to get acclimated to that. Were you ever in a position where you had to be the person to drive an initiative at your school?
Absolutely.
All right.
So when I started,
Sure. If it's not too painful.
I started this school, okay. When I started here, it was the year of the lockdown, and I was teaching 8th grade, 7th grade humanities, and I was missing having ThinkCERCA. And so I reached out to ThinkCERCA, told them my plight. I had actually helped with some grading for ThinkCERCA years before, and really felt confident with my ability to use the platform and grade. And I thought, oh, so I reached out to you all, and somebody there at the time said, you know what, we're going to give you 50 free licenses to use with your kids. And I had 50 students. So that was such a gift. I was sitting at my house, and I taught my students, who were really, as my husband often laughs, I call them my dots on the screen, because I didn't get to see them the way you and I are visiting. They were too shy. So I was teaching to dots, right? But yet anybody who was engaged and checked in and fully present in this virtual world of learning learned a lot through my use of ThinkCERCA. It was the hardest year of my career, even including teaching in Namibia with a chalk and no chalkboard. Teaching over the computer was horrendous. But then some of my supervisors or administrators would pop in, to our virtual classes. Yeah. And then pretty soon I was being asked. They didn't know what I was, the ThinkCERCA thing. They'd never heard of it. And then finally we came back on campus, and then more interest. And then now we're using it, right, on campus. Is it being used with fidelity in 6 through 12? No. But are we working toward it? Yes. And so I'm just glad that we've been able to, continue with it. And more teachers are starting to try it out and build the framework into their classes. So kids are learning how to argue for their point of view in many different classrooms now. So, but it's been a tough sell initially,
Yeah. I am just so happy to see it being used, and for teachers like you to just really embrace it and use it, because I know that when I was in school, I really could have used people focusing on teaching me those skills, the writing skills, and then being able to advocate for yourself and to make an argument and support that argument with evidence, and then to civilly present that opinion, I think is even important today. Even more so, because everybody's got an opinion. Everybody has a source that you may not agree with that source or not, but
not be credible.
Yeah, some source might be TikTok, and who knows where they got their information from. But being able to logically put that together and present your point of view and support it with evidence is very important today. And being able to think critically and to look at something and determine you're not even, you remember the phrase seeing is believing?
Oh yeah.
That is almost no longer the case. You may see something and it still might not be accurate or true. And so you really have to know how to think critically, to look at things closely. And so that's one of the things that ThinkCERCA allows us to do, is to teach that skill. And so that's very important today. And so I think I got one more question for you, or two more questions. First, data. Do you use the data reports? Does that help drive any of your choices in terms of instruction?
Absolutely. So part of our contract with ThinkCERCA, the ThinkCERCA teachers that are in the grading portion of the company, they grade for us. And so it gives us 3 times a year an objective look and feedback on the kids' writing. And so it's always, I can always sort of predict what's going to happen. So when I get them at the start of 7th grade, their growth focus is almost always evidence. They haven't learned how to cite sources. And then by the middle of the year, we've got all of that down. Most of my kids are just under proficient. I think they're at a 67, which is 70, I believe, is proficient. And their growth focus is coherence, which tells me, okay, now it's time. We've got to add an intro and a concluding paragraph. We've got all the other parts: claim, reason, evidence, reasoning, evidence, reasoning, evidence, reasoning, counter argument. We're going to take our concluding sentence now and turn it into a concluding paragraph, add an intro paragraph. So I use that data religiously that comes out of the, out of the grading process that ThinkCERCA shares with us. And they do the reflection. In fact, I have all the kids' reflections here that ThinkCERCA has given us to use stuff like this here, right? So each time the kids do one of the benchmarks, they're putting in their information on how the grader deemed each part of their CERCA and their glows and grows and the growth focus, and we can track that over time. And then I share that with the teacher that will inherit my students at the end of the year, so they have, at a quick glance, they can see the progression of where kids are. So I think the ThinkCERCA data is very helpful to my teaching, and it's more concrete than some of the other data we get from other assessments that are real broad. I can say, oh, I understand if you're working still, you're still working on reasoning. Well, let's talk about that, because that part of the rubric weighs heavily, right? How can you justify how your evidence supports your claim? That's not always easy, because that's more nuanced than just going to find your evidence. Now you got to justify how it supports your claim, and the kids struggle with that. But if I can see that go away as a growth focus, that means I've got that critical thinking's working.
Yes.
Now we just need to build an intro and a concluding paragraph. So it's fun. I like it.
Yeah.
The kids get it. Not that kids that I have had years ago that were that group that I taught online during our assessment cycle. They'll come over, Miss G, can you read my CERCA? No, I can't read your CERCA. That's not for me to see. I can't even access it, frankly. But they're so excited, right, to tell me, about, and I'll say, so what are you guys reading about this time? And they'll, often share. So they're still excited to come back as 9th and 10th graders to visit with me, and I was their 7th grade teacher, because they remember I was the first person to roll this out into their lives. It's great.
Yes, that is awesome. Yeah, again, it's one of those things. I didn't learn how to really write until I got to college, believe it or not.
I can relate. Yep. So
yeah, the fact that you're starting that process in middle school is incredible. We've had teachers that have started kids out in 3rd grade with ThinkCERCA, and then to be able to see where they are as writers later in their school years, it's been pretty impressive to see. So yeah, so I think that's it. I think that's all the questions that we have for you. I think you answered and shared your journey with us and shared some of your insights. Is there any parting words that you may have in terms of teaching and learning, and anything what gets you excited these days about the future?
What gets me excited about the future? Well, I think these kids are eager to see their world become a better place. They're definitely at a point, and with some effort on their parts, right, to raise awareness. They're definitely aware that the world they're inheriting from us is not what any thinking adult would want for them, right? So they're aware, and I often tell them, you are going to be voting in a few years, and you will have a voice through our democratic process, and in the time between now and then, you're developing a better understanding, and I like being a part of that, supporting them on that journey. And I always tell families or parents when they're struggling, this is a team effort. You're not alone, as the cliche says. It takes a village, and I like that I get to be a part of that for so many lives. My own son is graduating from college. I only have one, and so these are my kids. These kids in the class. I often tell them, I got my kid through school. Now my job is to help you get there, and that excites me. Just still being a part of that process with other people's children.
Yes.
Yeah.
Robyn Darling Greenlee, we appreciate you for being with us today and sharing your insights. I really enjoyed the conversation. Can't wait to get to Albuquerque. I think I might come to that balloon festival.
Oh yeah, the balloon fiesta is pretty phenomenal.
Yes.
Book your flight and hotel early.
Yeah. Okay.
In the fall.
Yes, October.
Yes.
I've been looking into it.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you being here on the show with us today.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.